Hello, this webinar is titled Voting. Do people of faith really care about the civic life and civic health of our society? I came across this sign in my research. I vote because it's my right, it's my responsibility, and it's my children's future. But do we really care, and do we act on this? Well, let's take a look at some percentages. Of all adults in the United States, for presidential elections, 36% of all adults participate. For non-presidential elections, that number falls to 26%. When it comes to local elections, only 4% of adults participate. Well, how do people of faith measure up? People that are committed to God, want to follow the Bible, and live their faith out in their daily lives. Well, a percentage of all believers that participate in a presidential election is 30%. For non-presidential, it's 20%, and for local elections, it's 3%. People of faith are notably below the average as far as their participation rates. Well, if the blue column is average and people of faith are below average, we can extrapolate, and what we find is that people not practicing faith or other faiths have to have a higher percentage. So they participate at a 40% level, a 30% level, and a 5% level. Now you can see how Christians really lag far behind. And the question really has to be asked, do we cherish our right to vote? Do we cherish and appreciate the history of our country, and what do we want for our country and our children's future? If you combine that question with this realization that a low percentage of all adults in the U.S. are actually the ones that put candidates in office, so consider this: if 36% of all adults are participating in a presidential election, only 18% are putting a candidate in office. Non-presidential, it's 13%, and local, it's as low as 2%. If Christians actually participated in the election process, they could have a dramatic impact on the election results and on our nation's health. Consider this from George Washington: "The propitious smiles of heaven can never be expected on a nation that disregards the eternal rules of order and right, which heaven itself has ordained." Washington is alluding to this: righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. Charles Finney, a great revivalist and preacher, said that God cares about civil government. He wrote several pamphlets and books on revival, and he made the observation that revival comes when Christians are involved in being salt and light to culture. And he actually has some salient remarks on civil government. But before we get to those remarks, let me share a little bit of this backstory so you can know the context. The Second Great Awakening had a powerful spiritual and cultural impact in society. Charles Finney and others became convinced that the gospel was meant by God to do more than to get people in a right relationship with Him. It was also to be a positive influence in transforming society. So a great network of volunteer societies were organized to solve social problems in society. Church leaders and influential Christian business leaders organized thousands of societies that touched every phase of American life: slavery, women's rights, alcoholism, moral reform, prison reform, education, character development, spiritual growth, and even world peace. By 1834, the total annual income of this network that had become known as the Benevolent Empire was $130 million. This was equal to the budget of the entire federal government at that time. Just absorb that fact for a minute. As this wave of spiritual renewal and social impact established itself in the land, the vision was that each Christian's obligation before God was to aim at being useful in the highest degree possible. So this network was doing massive good works in society and providing social reform, caring for the poor, and advocating for justice, with charitable giving that equaled the entire federal budget at that time. But the scope of their worldview encompassed not only God's passion and mercy on the poor, but all of life, including civil government. And so Finney's words are particularly challenging in light of all the compassionary acts that were taking place at that time. The time has come that Christians must vote for honest men and take consistent ground in politics, or the Lord will curse them. That means to be civically engaged. Christians have been exceedingly guilty in this matter, but the time has come when they must act differently. Christians seem to act as if they thought God did not see what they do in politics, but I tell you, He does see it. and he will bless or curse this nation according to the course they take in voting in civil affairs. Finney is saying God cares. We're showing that we don't. I believe this is something really to think about. This is Christian Civics Training. Thanks for listening.